the trusted source, Nationwide 90 FM, this summer as the globe tunes in to the FIFA World Cup Finals.
Messi, Fernandes, Martinez, Messi!
And we've got it covered right here on Nationwide 90 FM, the revolution in media.
Argentina, champions of the world!
What happens when a nation invests in its children, but the outcomes still fall short? Join the conversation inside Nationwide at 5 on Thursday, May 14 from 6 to 7 p.m. for the report launch of Room for Improvement, the Gap Between Public Spending and Child Outcomes in Jamaica. Hosted by the Caribbean Policy and Research Institute in partnership with UNICEF Jamaica, the launch will seek to examine the disconnect between public spending and...
Ready to tackle that building project? Start right. Start here at H&L Rapid True Value for building supplies. The time by H&L Rapid True Value is...
Nationwide time, 5 o'clock.
Interex Distributors presents the ultimate tile clearance sale. Transform your space for less. Dunrobin Plaza, 30 Dunrobin Avenue. The temperature by Interex Distributors is
30 degrees Celsius in Kingston, 29 out west in Montego Bay.
From the Nationwide News Network, comprehensive, incisive, tough. This is Nationwide at 5.
Good afternoon, I'm Robianne Williams.
And I'm Mahiri Stewart.
In Nationwide News at this hour, allegations of governance breaches surface against a former board chairman of the University Hospital of the West Indies.
Plans advanced to build agro-parks in every parish.
We have identified potential sites in every parish that does not know have an agro-park.
GISCO given ultimatum to reopen Alumina Partners of Jamaica Alpart.
U.S. Embassy warns Jamaicans not to run off.
National Menstrual Health Equity Pilot Initiative coming to mitigate period poverty.
In news from the rest of the world, Cuba considers $100 million U.S. aid offer as energy crisis worsens.
BRICS foreign ministers meet in India as Iran war tests the bloc's unity.
In sports, young Jamaican bowling star added to West Indies senior training camp in Antigua.
And later in our broadcast, in our cover story at 5:35, Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton says the government is set to launch an initiative to address period poverty.
We will establish the National Menstrual Health Equity Initiative to alleviate period poverty among school-age girls in Jamaica through strategic partnerships.
We'll get reactions from Government Senator Shireen Golding Campbell and Executive Director of Herflow Foundation, Shelley-Ann Weeks.
From 6 to 7:30, we'll broadcast live from Woolmer's Boys School for a report launch authorized by the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, Capri, and commissioned by UNICEF Jamaica, entitled Room for Improvement, the Gap Between Public Spending and Child Outcomes in Jamaica. We'll hear from Capri's Executive Director, Dr. Damian King, UNICEF's representative in Jamaica, Olga Isaza, and Capri's Director of Research, Dr. Diana Thorburn, among others.
All these and more as we take you home on air, Nationwide 90 FM, this Thursday afternoon. It's Thursday, May 14, 2026.
If it's news, it's got to be Nationwide 90 FM.
Now the details. Nationwide News has seen documents detailing allegations of governance issues and overstepped boundaries in 2023 at the University Hospital of the West Indies, UHWI, by then board chairman Wayne Chai Chung. This follows Chai Chung's appearance at Parliament's Public Accounts Committee, PAC, on Tuesday, where he denied claims of dysfunction at the board during his tenure. Mahiri Stewart has that story.
The Wayne Chai Chung-led board of the UHWI was constituted in November 2022. Just 12 months later, it was dissolved by Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton after Chai Chung and Deputy Chairman Dr. Andre Foote resigned. Their resignations came in protest of Dr. Tufton's decision not to reappoint the hospital's acting CEO, Fitzgerald Mitchell. Following their resignations, Dr. Tufton dissolved the entire UHWI board, claiming it was dysfunctional. Speaking at a sitting of the PAC on Tuesday, Chai Chung denied those claims.
I believe that I had a very committed board that was invested in the best interests of the hospital. As to why the minister would have considered the board dysfunctional, I think that's a question you will have to ask the minister himself. There are challenges at the hospital. There are very strong personalities. But more so, what's necessary is that you need strong leadership that is acting towards a plan which did not exist when we took the seat at the hospital.
But based on documents obtained and read by Nationwide News, it appears not everyone on the board at the time was satisfied with how Chai Chung carried out his duties as chairman. Among the documents were minutes of a board meeting which took place on October 18, 2023, around a month before the board met its end. The minutes outlined that one board member had raised concerns based on what they described as Chai Chung's, quote, unilateral or ease of writing to operational staff, instructing them to do things, end quote. The member went further by citing 3 different occasions in which they believed Chai Chung overstepped his boundaries as chairman. One such allegation was that Chai Chung had, quote, taken a perfectly good physiotherapy department and literally placed it in shambles, end quote. The member added that by instructing line staff to do things and bypassing management structures, the chairman was, quote, literally cutting the legs from beneath the management structure and authority of the hospital, end quote. The member then threatened to write a letter to the relevant authorities at the health ministry if the breaches they identified persisted. That letter ended up reaching the desk of the then permanent secretary at the health ministry, Dunstan Bryan, on November 23, 2023. The member wrote to Bryan highlighting not only the matters they raised during that board meeting, but more concerns that happened after. According to the letter, Chai Chung convened a meeting on November 15, during which he instructed the acting CEO and other invited members to recuse themselves. The member took issue with the fact that an ex officio member was also asked to recuse themselves, prompting the member to object. The member says this was yet another example of Chai Chung overstepping his boundaries as chairman. They state that following this, they received an invitation to a virtual meeting from Chai Chung, which contained what they perceived as a veiled threat. This threat allegedly was done in the form of Chai Chung claiming that he would not tolerate persons who did not vacate the meeting when he instructed. The member also highlighted that most of the governance issues they raised in the October 18 meeting were also raised by them directly with Chai Chung, as well as in private meetings held before that day. The member called on the permanent secretary to provide guidance on the matter, to postpone the meeting planned by Chai Chung, and to visit the board to outline its roles and responsibilities to prevent further damage from being done. Chai Chung's resignation as chairman and the dissolution of the UHWI board came 2 weeks after this letter was sent. When contacted, Mr. Chai Chung told our news center that the claims raised in the story were addressed and that he would let the public be the judge. Mahiri Stewart for Nationwide News.
The government has advanced its plans to build an agro park in every parish, along with a raft of other initiatives to boost food security. Agriculture Minister Floyd Green made the announcements in Gordon House on Wednesday as part of his sectoral debate presentation. Siobhan Campbell tells us more.
An agro-park is a specialized intensive agricultural zone designed to integrate the entire agricultural value chain, production, processing, and marketing within a defined area. According to the Agri-Invest Corporation, there are currently 9 across the country. Minister Floyd Green says the government has already identified land to establish additional parks in every parish.
This government has committed to the people of Jamaica that we will build an agro park in every parish. I spoke about it last year, and as such, let me update the House as to where we are. We have identified potential sites in every parish that does not now have an agro park. In St. Mary, New Pen has been identified, and we have already dug the well in New Pen, and we're designing a pressurized irrigation system. In Portland, Lower Layton has been identified, and we're going to be doing river training, we're going to be doing irrigation, storage, and a road network. In St. Anne, we've identified 2, Litford and Hindstone, and we're breaking ground for Litford this year to start the work on that agro park.
The minister similarly spoke to a national livestock policy to better support protein production on the island.
Livestock development is central to reducing our import dependency and stabilizing domestic protein supply. I'm pleased to announce to the members of this House that we're in the final stages of the development of the National Livestock Policy. In fact, we expect the policy to be at the Green Paper by the end of Q2 in this financial year. That National Livestock Policy will modernize breeding and genetic improvement systems, will strengthen animal health, veterinary services and biosecurity, will improve feed security and local feed production, will promote climate-resilient livestock housing and management practices, will enhance food safety, traceability and quality standards.
Minister Green announced a Green Paper on the National Youth in Agriculture Policy. A Green Paper in Parliament is an official consultative document produced by the government outlining tentative policy proposals, ideas or options for discussion rather than finalized decisions.
The youth policy will expand technical and entrepreneurial training, will provide structured pathways to land and financing, will promote youth-led climate-smart agriculture, will improve access to insurance and risk management tools for our youth, and will institutionalize youth participation in our decision-making policy. Madam Speaker, our youth represent the new frontier in persons engaged in agriculture, and it would be remiss of us not to recognize that more young people are coming into the agricultural space.
Siobhan Campbell for Nationwide News.
Meanwhile, Minister Green has given Juquan Iron and Steel Company, JISCO, an ultimatum to reopen the Alumina Partners of Jamaica, Alpart. The bauxite alumina plant in Nain, St. Elizabeth was shut down in late 2019 by JISCO to facilitate planned modernization and expansion. This was intended to last about 2 years. However, the plant has not fully reopened due to further delays. Minister Green says if a definitive answer is not given on the reopening, the government may be forced to take action.
We are seeking a definitive response regarding the reopening of Alpart and the future direction of its operation. This is a matter of significant importance to the mining sector, and more importantly to the people and communities of St. Elizabeth and to the country as a whole. We have to take a definitive decision about the future of JISCO this year. They had indicated to us that they would start the phase reopening towards the end of last year. We have already set a date to meet with them in person so that they can tell us their plans. If they don't have any immediate plans, the government will have to act.
Floyd Green, Minister of Mining.
Jamaicans traveling to the United States are being warned not to run off. The U.S. Embassy in Kingston issued the stern warning in a social media post on Thursday. It said, "Don't run off. You will be deported from the United States." The embassy further warned that there will be no chance of returning to the U.S. The notice forms part of the embassy's #TravelResponsibly social media campaign. It seeks to encourage travelers to stay compliant with U.S. immigration laws. The embassy has also resumed visa appointments, which were paused in January 2026.
Opposition Senator Cleveland Tomlinson is calling on the government to immediately publish a transparent expenditure plan for all outstanding disaster relief funds. The call follows a real-time audit done by the Auditor General's Department on the Hurricane Melissa Relief Initiative. Senator Tomlinson is rejecting what he says is the government's attempt to blame bureaucracy for the unused funds.
Unlike the government, the facts are honest. The Auditor General confirmed that 88% of the $1.4 billion in Hurricane Melissa donations remain uncommitted. Not just unspent, uncommitted, meaning there was no plan, no contract, no obligation to deploy them. Bureaucracy slows spending, but it does not prevent a government from committing funds. So the question that must be asked is why, several months after Hurricane Melissa, did 88% of donated funds have no commitment whatsoever attached to them?
According to the report, less than 2% of the over $1.4 billion in hurricane donations has been spent up to April 2 this year. That's just over $26 million spent 6 months post-Hurricane Melissa. Director General at the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM, Commander Alvin Gale, says the lack of spending is a result of prudent financial management. But Senator Tomlinson says it reflects a clear governance failure.
This appears to be a pattern because we must recall that the Auditor General said that 138 million from hurricane burial donations in 2024 sat idle and was never reported to the Ministry of Finance as required by the law. Senator Morgan cannot credibly blame red tape for money that was never directed anywhere. These are not bureaucratic delays. This is a governance failure. Jamaicans who donated in good faith deserve accountability, and we're calling on the government to immediately publish a transparent expenditure plan for all outstanding disaster relief funds.
Cleveland Tomlinson, Opposition Senator.
You're listening to Nationwide News at 5. More news after these.
You're listening to Nationwide 90 FM. The time is
5:14.
For 25 years, Digicel has been keeping Jamaica better connected. From late night calls to the texts, clicks, and moments that keep us close. Celebrating 25 years. Digicel, powered by you, connected by us.
Continuing the news, the government is set to launch a multi-sectoral national menstrual health equity pilot initiative to mitigate period poverty. Health and Wellness Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton announced the project during his contribution to the sectoral debate on Tuesday.
This year, Madam Speaker, we will establish the National Menstrual Health Equity Initiative to alleviate period poverty among school-age girls in Jamaica through strategic partnerships with the Ministry of Education and existing civic multilateral groups such as HerFlow and UNICEF. We'll be embarking on a multi-sectorial national menstrual health equity pilot initiative involving 8 schools, approximately 2,000 girls. Schools will be selected based on the high level of PATH students within the schools. We are allocating some $50 million to this initiative, and coming out of this initiative, Madam Speaker, we hope to achieve a policy around addressing the issue of period poverty in our society.
Period poverty is the inability to afford or access essential menstrual products, education, and sanitation facilities. This challenge continues to affect millions of girls and women globally. Dr. Tufton has revealed that 44% of Jamaican girls face period poverty. He told the lower house that the National Menstrual Health Equity Pilot Program aims to tackle this issue and improve adolescent health outcomes among school-age girls across Jamaica. According to the minister, this forms part of the government's broader public health agenda. He's urging Jamaicans to take period poverty seriously.
We all must be concerned about period poverty among our young girls in schools. It's not just a hygiene issue, but a systemic barrier that keeps girls out of classroom, undermine their academic potential, and reinforce cycles of inequality and poverty. 1 in 4, Madam Speaker, according to the stats, girls in low-income Jamaica communities miss school during their period due to lack of sanitary products. 30% of public schools provide free menstrual products, and period-related absenteeism is linked to low academic performance and wider gap.
Dr. Christopher Tufton, Health and Wellness Minister.
World in a Minute is brought to you by ABC Electrical Sales. We make things as easy as ABC. Hose assembly and supply, equipping Jamaica for success.
And Charles O'Connor Consulting Network, COCN, driven by international accounting standards, modern technology and integrity.
The World in a Minute.
The Cuban government says it's open to reviewing a U.S. offer of $100 million in aid hours after rare protests over worsening power cuts erupted on the communist-run island. Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez said on Thursday that Cuba was ready to hear the details of the proposal and how it would be implemented. The shortages have been exacerbated by a U.S.-imposed blockade of oil, which has squeezed the country's supplies of essentials such as diesel and fuel oil. On Wednesday, the U.S. State Department said it was renewing an offer to provide generous assistance to the Cuban people. In his response, Rodriguez said it was unclear whether the U.S. aid offer would be in cash or in-kind assistance. But he noted that the Cuban government does not, as a matter of practice, reject foreign aid offered in good faith.
Foreign ministers from the BRICS nations began a two-day meeting in New Delhi on Thursday as the expanding bloc faces divisions over the war in Iran, rising energy prices, and growing economic uncertainty. The meeting brings together diplomats from Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, along with newer member countries. It comes as the war in Iran has disrupted global energy supplies and driven up oil prices. It also coincides with U.S. President Donald Trump's meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping in Beijing.
World in a Minute was brought to you by ABC Electrical Sales. We make things as easy as ABC. Hose Assembly and Supply, equipping Jamaica for success.
And Charles O'Connor Consulting Network, COCN, driven by international accounting standards, modern technology, and integrity.
Recapping the top stories making nationwide news at this hour, allegations of governance breaches surface against a former board chairman of the University Hospital of the West Indies.
Plans advance to build agro parks in every parish.
GISCO given ultimatum to reopen Alumina Partners of Jamaica Alpart.
U.S. Embassy warns Jamaicans not to run off.
I'm Robianne Williams.
And I'm Mahiri Stewart.
Join the Nationwide Family Club at patreon.com/Nationwide News Network. News next, the headlines at 6.
Already have a T-Tag for your vehicle? Just top it up and go through. You can now conveniently add funds to your T-Tag on WhatsApp. Just save our T-Tag WhatsApp number 876-355-3336 and send us a message when you want to top up. Top up your T-Tag and continue to go through quicker and cheaper on Transjam highways.
What happens when a nation invests in its children, but the outcomes still fall short? Join the conversation inside Nationwide at 5 on Thursday, May 14 from 6 to 7 p.m. for the report launch of Room for Improvement, the Gap Between Public Spending and Child Outcomes in Jamaica. Hosted by the Caribbean Policy and Research Institute in partnership with UNICEF Jamaica, the launch will seek to examine the disconnect between public spending on children and child outcomes across Jamaica. So tune in to Nationwide at 5 on Thursday, May 14 from 6 to 7 p.m. for the launch of Room for Improvement, the Gap Between Public Spending and Child Outcomes in Jamaica. Catch this and so much more on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by the Caribbean Policy and Research Institute.
Sports at 5 is brought to you by Total Tools. Total Tools, every tool, every trade.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to sports here on Nationwide 90 FM. I'm Wayne Walker. We start with news on cricket because the St. Jago High School of our bowling standout, that's Vita Laws, has been drafted into a 17-man West Indies senior squad for a 10-day training camp over at Antigua, May 21 to 31. Now, it's a senior high-performance training camp, and Laws, who starred for West Indies at the last Youth World Cup, has been invited as part of Cricket West Indies' continued commitment to developing the next generation of players. The camp will be held at the Coolidge Cricket Ground, and it will be held under the supervision of head coach Darren Sammy, and he'll get support from newly minted fast bowling consultant Otis Gibson, who will officially begin his tenure. The camp is aimed at intensifying preparation for the demands of a tough international schedule ahead for the senior team, to include the home series against Sri Lanka, which gets underway in just about 3 weeks from now. And the two other Jamaicans will be at the camp, John Campbell and Brandon King, a group that will effectively provide the 15-man squad for the first 3 one-day international, well, the 3 one-day internationals against the Sri Lankans starting June 3. The other participants include Shea Hope, Joel Andrew, Akeem August, Casey Carty, Rustin Chase, Matthew Ford, Justin Greaves, Amir Jangu, Alzari Joseph, Shamar Joseph, Gudakesh Moti, Kari Pear, Jaden Seals, and Shamar Springer. Some football news now. The Jamaica Football Federation has confirmed that they've hammered down 2 international friendlies against the regional powers, Panama, for the Jamaica national senior women's team as part of their preparation for that crunch November 27 World Cup qualifier against Costa Rica at the CONCACAF qualifying tournament. Now the games will be played at the Estadio Romel Fernandez Gutierrez, and that is in Panama City. The games June 5 and 8. Michael Ricketts, president of the Jamaica Football Federation, says he's very excited about the game, the timely nature of the game, because they came at a very strategic point.
I would think so. It's a FIFA window, and the coach would certainly be looking to have his best players. This being a very important assignment having to do with preparing for the World Cup qualifying game against Costa Rica. So yes, the players ought to be available unless there are injuries. But being a FIFA window, we are expecting that the players will be available.
And he's also happy that the games will be against an opponent that will give the Jamaicans a true test as to where they are in their preparation.
Is very, very important in terms of World Cup preparation. These 2 games would be in the June window, and of course it will be against a good, strong opponent in Panama. So we're just super excited, and I'm looking forward to assembling our players and getting a good result. So, like I've said, it's all in preparing for that last World Cup qualifying game against Costa Rica on November 27th. So, like I said, we are excited, and of course we are hoping for the best, and we're looking forward to our senior women's team for a 3rd consecutive time.
That's JFF President Michael Ricketts. That game against Costa Rica on November 27 is pivotal, because if the Jamaica national senior women's team win that game, then they'll punch a 3rd straight ticket to the World Cup finals, and the World Cup finals next year in Brazil. Still with football, reigning Ballon d'Or holder Ousmane Dembélé of Paris Saint-Germain and the Real Madrid superstar Kylian Mbappe, well, they lead a 26-man French star-studded World Cup squad announced on Thursday for the FIFA World Cup this summer. Mbappe, France's second leading goal scorer all time with 56, and of course he's expected to captain the team despite recent struggles with a thigh injury. Dembélé, only the 2nd French player in the century to win the Ballon d'Or, is yet to score a goal at the World Cup despite appearing twice. Bayern Munich's Michael Olise and Dembélé's PSG teammate Desire Doué complete an exciting attacking quartet, while Manchester City playmaker Ryan Cherky and Arsenal defender Will Saliba are among 7 Premier League-based players in the 26-man squad. Fullback Lucas Hernandez and midfielder N'Golo Kante and John Mbappe and Dembélé as the only survivors from the French team that won the 2018 World Cup in the Russian capital, Moscow. There's no place in the squad, though, for the Real Madrid midfielder Eduardo Camavinga or the Tottenham Hotspur star Randal Kolo Muani, both of whom were involved in 2022 when the French went all the way to the final, only to lose out to Argentina. Didier Deschamps, the coach, has led France back-to-back World Cup finals. He's already announced that this tournament in the Americas will be his last in charge of the national team, and France will open their campaign on June 16. They'll be in New Jersey, and they'll take on Senegal. They'll take on Iraq in the 2nd game on June 22, and that of course they're in Group I, and they close out their group campaign against the Norwegians on June 26. The World Cup finals are just 27 days away, and Nationwide 90 FM continues its countdown to the greatest show on the planet with another memorable moment in World Cup history. Now, a young Colombian star introduced himself to the world at the 2014 tournament in Brazil, and he lit up the tournament with several outstanding goals. But it was this item against Uruguay which will be remembered for the ages. James Rodriguez provides a World Cup moment today.
Aguilar. Helped by Alvaro Pereira. Hit by James! Oh, what a goal! One of the greats! My word, this boy's a star! 4 games, 4 goals at World Cup 2014. And that is one that must be up in lights. Brilliant! Just brilliant!
So Nationwide 90 FM will have live coverage of the FIFA World Cup, and we start on the opening day, June 11. It's a big one It's from the Azteca Stadium. It's going to be Mexico against South Africa, and it will follow what is expected to be a massive, glitzy opening ceremony. 2 Jamaicans are down to compete at the Tokyo Golden Grand Prix on Sunday in Japan. Adrian Carr is listed for the men's 200 meters, while Amoy Brown, she returns to the Japanese capital less than a year after reaching the 100 meters hurdles semi-finals to face another stellar field in the event. Noah Lyles is also making a return to the stadium. He won 200 meters gold last year. This time, though, he'll be running in the men's 100 meters, while another big American, Rai Benjamin, who won 400 meters hurdles gold 9 months ago, is also going back, but this time he'll be competing in the men's flat 400 meters. And finally, in sports at this time, the Jamaican sprint star Brianna Williams says she came close to quitting athletics after an injury-riddled 2025 season. Williams, who is still the youngest world under-20 sprint double champion at 16, says it was a real emotional period in her life.
I almost quit last year after trials, I'm not going to lie. After my 200, I was just bawling and like, why am I continuing, you know? And I found myself again, you know, with the support of my circle. And I came home. I feel like that's what I needed. You know, I think I was homesick and just a lot of other personal things. And from day one, Otto and I hit it back. You know, he brought his things to the table. I brought my things to the table. And from there, it's just been great. Every day at training, great days.
And Williams was speaking on the Mr. Analyst podcast less than 2 weeks after helping Jamaica win gold in the 4x100 meters, the world relays in the Gaborone in the Botswanan capital of Gaborone. And she says at the minute she's now earmarking events just to help her to build up to the national championships in Jamaica later this year.
Right now, I'm going to be running at the LA Invitational, Los Angeles on May 23rd, and the Lone Star Grand Prix, June 6th. A few stars have already headlined that, so that's in Texas. I believe that everything comes in its time. You know, don't try to rush, you know, the process or your times. I'm just letting like all my hard work just show for itself. But yeah, I wouldn't see it as a surprise from the work I've been putting in. But yeah, I'd love to surprise myself quickly.
That's Brianna Williams, and that will do it for sports at this time. Alec is out, so I'm going to be back with the major sportscast at 6:05 this evening on the cover story just ahead.
Sports at 5 was brought to you by Total Tools. Total Tools, every tool, every trade.
For all your custom framing, printing, graphic design, and purchase of art, Make It Frame Art Jamaica Limited, serving you for over 40 years. The time by Frame Art Jamaica is
5:31.
Multi-link, access every time, everywhere I go. Multi-link, 24/7 access for me. It's just a win-win when we use Multi-link. This card is Jamaican built, yeah. Fast and secure, you can use anywhere, spend while supporting the economy.
Look for the Multi-link logo on your card and benefit from Jamaica's largest debit payment network.
Multi-link, 24/7 access for me.
What would I do without my Multi-link?
For 25 years, Digicel has been keeping Jamaica better connected. From late night calls to the texts, clicks, and moments that keep us close. Celebrating 25 years. Digicel, powered by you, connected by us.
For all your electrical needs, visit ABC Electrical Sales. They stock a wide variety of electrical supplies, including plugs, switches, panel boards, and conduits, plus energy-saving fixtures. ABC Electrical Sales stocks brands like GE, Siemens, Philips, Cutler Hammer, and Allen Bradley. They also offer free island-wide delivery just to suit your needs. Visit them at Shop 8, Hagley Park Plaza, Kingston 10, or call 876-754-3714-5 or 876-754-3825-8. ABC Electrical Sales, for a better choice in the electrical business.
It's the planet's ultimate game, the final of the Football World Cup.
The FIFA World Cup finals are coming to Nationwide 90 FM. We've long been the trusted source to deliver global sporting events like the Olympic Games and the World Championships. And now, we're about to have our fingerprint all over another successful landing of the biggest of them all, the FIFA World Cup Finals. 104 games across 39 amazing days of football from 16 cities in the Americas. Boston to New York to Monterey to Atlanta. Join the trusted source Nationwide 90 FM this summer as the globe tunes in to the FIFA World Cup Finals. And we've got it covered right here on Nationwide 90 FM, the revolution in media.
Argentina, champions of the world!
Wake up, Jamaica.
It's another glorious day on Nationwide this morning. From your 6 a.m. alarm to the news at 6. Coming up in the news at 6 to me telling you what's on my mind.
To more news at 7 a.m. Coming up in the news at 7. And then the biggest issues dissected, interrogated and discussed on the front page. Nationwide this morning fires you up and sets you right for the remainder of the day.
And there's much more until 9 a.m. Want to know which roads to avoid on your morning commute?
Time now for Street Smarts 2 with Little McLean.
Listen to Street Smart.
Want to hear more about things happening at the community level outside the bustling corporate area? Listen to Across Jamaica.
George, it's someone's birthday.
Happy birthday, yeah, my friend.
And that someone will hear a special greeting every morning via the Birthday Club.
Nationwide this morning on the revolution in media.
It's coffee, tea, and everything else
for those who want an energetic, rip-roaring start to their day.
Okay, guys, we're back.
Powerful women and men perform for charity. An inspiring evening where public servants, diplomats, business leaders, and creatives unite with their talents, all for the children of Mustard Seed.
Did you miss us? Because we missed you.
Join us this Father's Day, Sunday, June 21 at 7 p.m. at Jamaica College. Admission, adults $4,000, children 12 and under $2,000. Tickets at select Fontana pharmacies and online at touchstonelink.com. Powerful women and men perform for charity. Great performances, great people, one great cause. Powered by Nationwide News Network.
Cover Story is brought to you by
Multilink. Roll with control. Use Multilink. Safe, fast, and accepted in more locations.
Multi-link, access every time, everywhere I go. Multi-link, 24/7 access for me. It's just a win-win when we use Multi-link. This card is Jamaican built, yeah. Fast and secure, you can use anywhere. Spend while supporting the economy.
Look for the Multilink logo on your card and benefit from Jamaica's largest debit payment network.
Multi-link, 24/7 access for me.
What would I do without my Multi-link?
Our school we all love dearly. We think it is the best. Maroon and gold or colors, the rising sun or crest. Our motto means in all things, we try to do our best at home, at school, at work, at play day, we put it to the test. Welcome, listeners, to the Cover Story. It is 5:35, and we come to you live from the Wolmer's Boys School Auditorium. Listeners, I am proud to be back at my alma mater. The fates have conspired, it seems, today to put me in this chair this afternoon. We are going to be bringing to you later the report launch, that's Room for Improvement, the gap between public spending and child outcomes in Jamaica. That report, authored by the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, Capri, and commissioned by UNICEF Jamaica. But that's later in the program, listeners. Before that, we have a very important topic to touch on, and that's the matter of period poverty. The government is set to launch a multi-sectoral national menstrual health equity pilot initiative involving 8 schools and approximately 2,000 girls. The schools will be selected based on the number of program of advancement through health and education path students enrolled. The initiative was outlined by Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton during his contribution to the sectoral debate in the House of Representatives on Tuesday.
Speaker, the 7th one is period poverty and adolescent health. Period poverty is the inability to afford or access essential menstrual products, education and sanitation facilities. It causes significant health risk, shame and stigma for forcing many to use unsafe alternatives or to miss schoolwork. Key causes include high cost, lack of infrastructure, and systematic inequality. Globally, over 500 women lack access to menstrual facilities. Yes. And this is not just for Jamaica. In the US, it's 1 in 4. So it's a problem right across. Madam Speaker, we all must be concerned about period poverty among our young girls in schools. It's not just a hygiene issue, but a systemic barrier that keeps girls out of classroom, undermine their academic potential, and reinforce cycles of inequality and poverty. 1 in 4, Madam Speaker, according to the stats, girls in low-income Jamaica communities miss school during their period due to lack of sanitary products. 30% of public schools provide free menstrual products, and period-related absenteeism is linked to lower academic performance and wider gap. This year, Madam Speaker, we will establish the National Menstrual Health Equity Initiative to alleviate period poverty among school-age girls in Jamaica through strategic partnerships with the Ministry of Education and existing civic multilateral groups such as HerFlow and UNICEF. We'll be embarking on a multi-sectorial national menstrual health equity pilot initiative involving 8 schools, approximately 2,000 girls. Schools will be selected based on the high level of path students within the schools. We are allocating some $50 million to this initiative, and coming out of this initiative, Madam Speaker, we hope to achieve a policy around addressing the issue of period poverty in our society. Madam Speaker, we must promote good hygiene and health.
That's Dr. Christopher Tufton, Minister of Health and Wellness. He was making his contribution to the sectoral debate in the House of Representatives on Tuesday. Well, to get reactions, we're going to be joined by Government Senator Shireen Golding Campbell and Executive Director of the HerFlow Foundation, Shelly-Ann Weeks. Good afternoon, ladies.
Good afternoon. Afternoon, Siobhan. Afternoon, Shelley. Champion Shelley.
Good.
Hi.
Good afternoon to you both. I will start with you, Shireen Golding Campbell, because I recall it was back in 2024 you raised this very issue as part of one of your State of the Nation debate contributions. Your reaction to the initiative outlined by Dr. Christopher Tufton?
I'm thrilled. This represents to me movement by the government to take a look at this issue in a very serious way. And so I am absolutely thrilled that this pilot is going to be engaged and that ultimately a policy will be developed to address this issue.
And Shelly-Ann Weeks, what do you say in terms of this new initiative by the government?
I still haven't found words to describe the emotions I'm feeling. This is after 10 years of a lot of work on our part at HerFlow, and I started talking about this issue in 2016 in a public way. We have done lots of media. We've even spoken right here on Nationwide several times about period poverty.
Yes.
And my goal was to always find a way to get Jamaican girls having access to free menstrual products in school, because I had a problem with the fact that girls were missing schools because they had a period. So to say thrilled is just not enough. I'm just happy that it made its way on the policy agenda and that we are going to be doing this pilot program that will eventually get us to the point where every Jamaican girl should not have to choose between her period and her education. I'm so happy.
Well put. So, Shelly-Ann Weeks, we don't know the full details of the pilot yet. I'm sure we'll get more information once it is rolled out. But what do you think will be critical in terms of the necessary infrastructure in place to ensure that it goes smoothly and we do see it expanded across the entire education system, considering the very important topic that is period poverty?
All right, we're putting all of my cards on the table. I will say that we have been in contact and conversation with the minister and his team prior to this announcement, so we knew this was coming. So I've been consulting with him and showing and sharing the information that we have learned in the work that we've been doing over the last 10 years. The space that I work the most in is in school. We visit about 120 schools a year, and every school that we go to, we collect a lot of data. So we are able to see what the need looks like, how many girls are absent from school. We can even tell you about the improvements that are made when we donate products to the schools. Since HerFlow's inception, we have donated over 15 million and counting menstrual products in schools. So we know that providing the resources work. What I'm most excited about is an initiative that will get the education up and running on the level that it needs to be, and also to upgrade the infrastructure, because some of the bathrooms do need some work to get to the place where girls can function in dignity while they're at schools.
Excellent. Shireen Golding Campbell, I think a lot of people don't understand this topic well enough. I mean, it's not just about providing pads to young girls. There's more to it than that. What do you think is essentially one of the biggest stumbling blocks to a policy like this, considering that, as the minister pointed out, 30% of our education institutions already do this as just a matter of fact? Why hasn't that extended to 100% to this day?
Well, I mean, I'm sure financial resources is a part of it. And I think Shelley will share with you that, in a lot of the schools, it's the teachers themselves, the guidance counselors, who come out of their pockets to assist these girls. But a big part, I think, of the hurdle that we'll have to get over is the stigma, is the culture we have of not discussing these things, of the girls who are unable to afford period products feeling shame. And so I am really thrilled that this pilot will be engaged, because in the engagement of the pilot is the discussion, and the education component of it should go a far way to mitigating against some of the stigma that we have traditionally treated this issue with. Because it is not about just the affordability. It is also the emotional stability of girls who, many who can suffer moderate to severe depression when they're having to deal with period poverty, and some of them who don't feel they can have any conversation with anybody. So there's the feeling of isolation, and the data, the studies that have been done indicate that. I certainly recall in my research in preparing for the State of the Nation debate in 2023, actually it was, that this was a very live issue in the research that I was looking at.
Understood. Please stay with us, ladies. We are up on the break, and I want to really go back to that education concern as part of this pilot initiative. That's up after the break.
The time by Grace Good Move is...
It's 5:46.
Multi-link, access every time, everywhere I go. Multi-link, 24/7 access for me. It's just a win-win when we use multi-link. This card is Jamaican built, fast and secure, you can use anywhere, spend while supporting the economy.
Look for the Multilink logo on your card and benefit from Jamaica's largest debit payment network.
Multi-link, 24/7 access for me.
What would I do without my Multilink?
For 25 years, Digicel has been keeping Jamaica better connected. From late night calls to the texts, clicks, and moments that keep us close.
Hi, babes.
A network built in Jamaica for Jamaicans. But connection has never been just about the network. It's about the people behind every hello.
Yo, my general.
Celebrating 25 years. Digicel, powered by you, connected by us.
Transgem Highways is having a 50% Mother's Day discount on T-Tag packages. Get yours from the teller at the toll booth for only $1,250, including a $500 toll credit from May 4 to May 30, 2026. When you get your T-Tag, top up to keep using it. Choose whichever method of topping up is most convenient for you. Go through quicker with a T-Tag every time on Transgem Highways.
Again, Quarter Geese listeners, welcome back to Nationwide at 5, the cover story. We're at the Wolmer's Boys School Auditorium for the report launch of Room for Improvement, the Gap Between Public Spending and Child Outcomes in Jamaica. That report authored by Capri and commissioned by UNICEF Jamaica. We are currently, though, discussing period poverty, an initiative launched by the government to address, well, a pilot initiative launched to address the concern of period poverty in our schools, young ladies having to miss out on their education as a result of just the basic necessity of having a menstrual pad. We have with us Government Senator Shireen Golding Campbell and Executive Director of the Herflow Foundation, Shelley Ann Weeks. So, Shelley Ann Weeks, the Senator spoke to the matter of education because that is one of the things which I was horrified to learn is very much lacking in this subject matter of period poverty and just periods in general. A lot of women not getting a lot of young girls, rather, let me say, not getting the requisite education when it comes to dealing with what is essentially a natural and periodical change in their body chemistry. Do you believe that we can address that, at least at the school level, through this initiative?
Well, that is a very big part of the initiative. The education is not only going to be, a big part of it is going to be consistent because, yes, it is very lacking. And as the Senator says, the stigma and the shame is a big barrier to ensuring that the girls get the information that they need. A part of what we also want to do is to ensure that parents have the information because we assume that parents have all the information that they need, but sometimes they need some resources so that they can guide their children as they go through puberty. So yes, education is going to be a big part of it because in order for us to really address period poverty, it's not just a function of providing the products. It is also the education and ensuring that the infrastructure can manage them as they go through this very natural process every single month and still get an education with dignity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Shireen, yes, go ahead.
You know, one of the things that I was very heartened about was that the education component is not only directed at parents and the girls, but also the boys.
Yes, that's a big part of it.
Yes, it's important for the boys and our men to understand what those young girls are going through when they're experiencing this. So I was very excited to hear the minister's presentation on this issue, and even more excited to understand how he's now conceiving of this idea of the social determinants of health, because this is one of the things that fall under that.
Yes.
Right? And so when the government begins to look at the social aspects of health and look at the critical social and community structures that support that, then it tells me that they're really having a far more comprehensive view of the health outcomes of the citizens than we have treated with in the past. So I am very happy with the entire presentation, and in particular the presentation on period poverty. I support the initiative.
And Shireen Golding Campbell, I'm glad you brought up the matter of the boys. I mean, when we talk about matters such as period poverty, it's not just limited to girls. There is a role to play for not only the teachers at these institutions, but the boys. Because I see here in one of the comments on YouTube, and I thank you for bringing this up, my brother, try and stay away from the word pad. Sanitary napkin is a better description in 2026. So you see, even I sometimes have to learn something new when it comes to matters such as this. Do you see I don't know if you've had an understanding of the program, or at least what you expect to see in it. Do you see as part of this initiative, and when it is rolled out to the wider school system, a proper onboarding for our young men as well as the teachers in our institutions as to how to handle matters in relation to periods when it crops up at schools?
Well, I'm sure there are best practices and in terms of the kind of nomenclature that they use in the international community. I am one of those, though, who don't think that we should, censure how we talk about it. because women, I don't call it sanitary napkins. I call it pads. That's what I buy. That's what I use. But I think that if we can destigmatize some of the words, so that it's not a big thing. It's a normal, natural process, and come to understand what it means for our girls. Then I think we're far better off than telling the young men and young women, no, don't use this word, use this word. I mean, so long as it's not an offensive, profane word.
But proper education around it.
Well, I would like to speak to this.
Go ahead, Shelley. If you don't mind, Shireen Golding.
Shelley's the expert, I
go ahead, Shelley.
Being late in the day. You guided me a lot. All right. So, like I indicated earlier, we visit over 100 schools a year, and whenever we go into a co-ed school, we insist that the boys are part of the classroom. And I can tell you from experience that the boys are absolutely open to learning. They're curious. They want to know. They like to touch the products. They try to figure out how to put them on. They have a million questions. But the part about teaching boys that warms my heart every single time? All of them ask the very same question. How can I help? I connect period to the experience that their mothers are having. And all of them are concerned about their mothers. So they want to know, how can I make mommy's life easier when she has her period? That has been the experience.
I remember that growing up.
Yes, when we show them what can possibly happen to girls, because not every girl has painful periods, but they don't have any issue in terms of talking about it. They want to know more. And what I want to do is to encourage parents, especially mothers, to have this conversation with their sons, because it normalizes it and it helps us to deal with the stigma and the shame that is still surrounding periods. So inviting the boys to participate has a lot of positive benefits, and I think it is something that is definitely going to be a part of this pilot and a part of rolling out reproductive health education overall, because even though they don't have a direct experience of having a period, they are still impacted by it.
Excellent. We have 5 minutes left to us, ladies, and I want to expand this a little wider, because period poverty is not something that only affects young girls and affects those in schools. It does affect women in the wider society. While we know this initiative is targeted to a specific area, and I can accept that as a good decision in the right direction, but what do you see as a necessary wider policy perspective about addressing period poverty as a countrywide concern at every age level? I start with you, Shelley Ann Weeks.
Well, I have a goal, and I have a whole list of requirements and demands that if you ask me, I can tell you how it's going on. I want to be Scotland. Scotland was the first country to provide period products for all its citizens who need them. So not only are period products free in schools, they're free in hospitals, public bathrooms, any building you go into, you go to the airport, there's period products there, and it is absolutely free for everybody who needs it. That is where I want us to go, and I think we can get there. This is a great first step. I think going after girls in schools was a brilliant move to make at the beginning, because they are the ones who I think are the most vulnerable. But we have to also address their mothers. I can guarantee you that if the little girl doesn't have any pads, her mother don't have any either. And that can mean her not being able to go to that job interview where she can get that job so she can buy her own pads by herself eventually. We are also talking about, in addition to the physical challenges that they can have when they misuse the product, or they do harmful alternatives. There's also the self-esteem issues and the depression and all of the mental and emotional issues that come with them not being able to function in full dignity. So I would like to be Scotland. I want Jamaica to get to the point where period products are available for free for every Jamaican who needs it.
And Shireen Golden Campbell, obviously the politics behind it that could be considered cost prohibitive. I don't know what the budgetary arrangement would need to be, but at the very edge of that discussion there by Shelley Ann Weeks, where she said if the child does not have access to these sanitary products, there's a good chance the mother does not as well. Do you see room among this pilot and the school initiative where you can address that concern specifically, where you allow the mother, the parent as well, to get access to the period products through the school system?
Well, I can tell you that the pilot, as Minister Tufton announced, it is intended to deliver menstrual hygiene kits to girls. We would be naive if we thought that those hygiene kits were going to go home and not be shared between mother and daughter if there was such a need. But I would say this, that, in relation to women, it's an even bigger picture, because our women make up, certainly when I look at the numbers in 2023, 46.5% of the labor force. If women are missing work 2-3 days out of any month, you can extrapolate that to imagine and conceive of the kind of productivity interruptions that causes. So I agree with Shelley Ann. Aspirationally, we want to get to a place where all of the women and girls in Jamaica who need period products are able to get them, whether through public facilities or some other public service delivery program. This is a great start, and I think the minister is moving in the right direction. So I look forward to him building on this initiative to ensure that we don't have to talk about period poverty in years to come.
Excellent. I'm sure we'll have more about this discussion in terms of how that pilot went, and hopefully we can see it extended beyond just a pilot. That's Government Senator Shireen Golden Campbell, and we also have with us Executive Director of the Herflow Foundation, Shelley Ann Weeks. Thank you, ladies, for joining me this afternoon, and all the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us, and thank you to your listeners.
We take a quick break, listeners, and then we come back. The launch of the Room for Improvement, the gap between public spending and child outcomes in Jamaica. That report there, authored by the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, Capri, and commissioned by UNICEF. Please stay with us.
Cover Story was brought to you by
Multilink. Roll with control. Use Multilink. Safe, fast, and accepted in more locations.
For all your electrical needs, visit ABC Electrical Sales. They stock a wide variety of electrical supplies, including plugs, switches, panel boards, and conduits, plus energy-saving fixtures. ABC Electrical Sales stocks brands like GE, Siemens, Philips, Cutler Hammer, and Allen Bradley. They also offer free island-wide delivery just to suit your needs. Visit them at Shop 8, Hagley Park Plaza, Kingston 10, or call 876-754-3714-5 or 876-754-3825-8. ABC Electrical Sales, for a better choice in the electrical business.
If you've ever called in, shared your story, or got help on this show, then you're already family. Now make it official. Join the nationwide 90 FM Family Club today on Patreon.
What happens when a nation invests in its children, but the outcomes still fall short? Join the conversation inside Nationwide at 5 on Thursday, May 14 from 6 to 7 p.m. for the report launch of Room for Improvement, the gap between public spending and child outcomes in Jamaica. Hosted by the Caribbean Policy and Research Institute in partnership with UNICEF Jamaica, the launch will seek to examine the disconnect between public spending on children and child outcomes across Jamaica. So tune into Nationwide at 5 on Thursday, May 14 from 6 to 7 p.m. for the launch of Room for Improvement, the gap between public spending and child outcomes in Jamaica. Catch this and so much more on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by the Caribbean Policy and Research Institute.
As a parent, you give your children a good start in life. You nurture, protect, and guide them.
Parenting is a process that prepares your child for independence. As your child grows and develops, there are many things you can do to help your child. Stay tuned to The Big Show, nationwide this morning, for parenting tips. Fridays at 6:53 a.m. Only here will you learn everything you need to know about parenting. Tips to help parents navigate the incredibly challenging and rewarding journey of child rearing. Parenting tips on Nationwide at 90 FM, the revolution in media.
Shrats, you know here, we totally turn up down at Total Tools. Big things are going. Yes, my love. 10 a.m., May 15 at Total Tools, Lot C6 Drax Hall. Whole heap of new things, whole heap of excitement. And guess what? Cliffviews Online are going to be live on location from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. About prizes, surprises, and giveaways. I got day. But another that alone, you know, them are going to have up to 25% off at all 3 locations. Can't miss this. Remember, 10 a.m., May 15, Total Tools, Lot C6, Drax Hall. Catch it live on YouTube during Cliffviews Online from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's a go massive.
Here is the planet's ultimate game, the final of the Football World Cup.
The FIFA World Cup finals are coming to Nationwide 90 FM. We've long been the trusted source to deliver global sporting events like the Olympic Games and the World Championships. And now, we're about to have our fingerprint all over another successful landing of the biggest of them all, the FIFA World Cup finals.
Mbappe.
104 games across 39 amazing days of football from 16 cities in the Americas. Boston to New York to Monterey to Atlanta. Join the trusted source Nationwide 90 FM this summer as the globe tunes in to the FIFA World Cup Finals. And we've got it covered right here on Nationwide 90 FM, the revolution in media.
Argentina, champions of the world!
Welcome back, listener, viewers, to, well, I would say the common story, would say Nationwide at 5. We're still at the Wolmer's Boys School Auditorium, my alma mater, for the report launch for Room for Improvement, the gap between public spending and child outcomes in Jamaica. That report there, authored by the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, Capri, and commissioned by UNICEF. It is showing that the gap between public and child outcomes in Jamaica is a public finance report which examines how Jamaica's public finances allocated and spent on children across key sectors, including education, health, social protection, child protection, nutrition, public safety, and housing. We're set to hear the main findings of the report as well as a panel discussion with the policy experts. You'll hear from Capri's Executive Director, Dr. Damien King, UNICEF's representative in Jamaica, Olga Isaza, and Capri's Director of Research, Dr. Diana Thornburg, among others. The event is open to students, policymakers, international development partners, and private sector representatives who are interested in using evidence to strengthen the decisions that affect children in Jamaica. Well, before she gets up on the podium, we actually have with us Dr. Diana Thornburg, the Director of Research at Capri. Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being here.
And we welcome you on this program. And I had a discussion with my producer earlier because I had seen a report like this before, but it was focusing specifically on education, the concerns about what we're spending on education versus what we get in terms of the outcomes. But no, I have to understand that this is more than just focusing on the education sector. We're looking at the wider budgetary allocation, how the outcomes of our children are impacted. So I just want to get your understanding. Why are we still not matching the level of spending that we pump into the system in terms of trying to get the proper outcomes? We have the PATH program and so many others to uplift children, but we're not getting what we want for that buck.
The short answer is that because we're not tracking it. So we know what goes in, but we don't know what comes out. And we are not clear on what happens between the input and all we do know is that the output that we're getting are not matching our expectations, and they're not giving us value for money. And that's the question that has to be asked. And we're not going to know what that is until we have proper accountability, which is any government, ministry, department, or agency that is spending on children or part of spending reaches children, that they're required to track it and be held accountable to it, have output targets, and then measure what the outputs are against those targets. That is not an unusual thing to do. Jamaicans do that.
While I understand it, because you would suggest that we're all about accountability. Is the money being allocated to what it is supposed to be allocated for? Beyond that, it's not just whether is the Ministry of Education spending what it says it's spending on education. It's what are they spending on it, and are we getting value, correct?
It is that, but it is also the composition of the spend. So we look at 8 sectors, what we considered kind of the main building blocks of what goes into making a child, making a human. So housing, nutrition, public safety, social protection. So 8 sectors that we covered. And we looked not only at the composition of spending within each sector, but also across sectors. So in Jamaica, most of the money we spend on children is in education.
Yes.
And the least, which might surprise you, it surprised me, is on culture and sports. So the things that we are supposed to be a global superpower for, our culture, our track and field, we're spending very little on it. And we're not only spending very little, that amount is decreasing in real terms. And we're not fulfilling the commitments that we're making in those areas as well. So it is not only about how the spending is being allocated within each ministry, within Ministry of Education or within the Ministry of Health, but also how it's being allocated across all the different sectors and all the different areas. And the main finding, apart from that we're not counting, we're not checking, we're not being held accountable, is that we are not spending enough on the first 1,000 days. So we spend a lot on education.
Yes.
We spend 19% of our GDP on education. We spend more as a proportion of our GDP than OECD countries. So higher than Latin America and the Caribbean, higher than wealthy countries. And we are not getting the outcomes. And in part, it's because we're not spending enough in the first 1,000 days. So children are getting to school without the foundation they need to make use of all that investment that we're making in education. So one of the recommendations of the report is to shift some of that spending, whether it's, I'm not saying shift it out of education, but there certainly needs to be more resources in the first 1,000 days, and not just in early childhood, but in things housing, health, nutrition, mental health. It's a big issue, a big gap that we found in the report, in the research. And so that's part, so it's what's happening within ministries, departments and agencies, and it's also what's happening more broadly in terms of where money is going across sectors.
And I think one of the simplest solutions one would suggest is that why don't we just increase the money, just spend more?
No, actually that's an interesting point. So, one of the things that we thought we would come out of the report with was like this is how much Jamaica spends. We spend X amount of money, and it's per child. We spend this amount of money, and then we'll be able to compare, do we match up with other countries? How has that changed over time? But what we realize is it's not the number that matters. It's what the outputs are. Because if you spend $10 on any given product that you're trying to create, and you are not getting $10 of output, it doesn't matter if you're spending $100 or $1,000. So it's not the amount that's going in, it's what we are getting for however much it is we're putting in, because we are spending on children. We spend money on children. We spend more than we did last year this year. We spend more this year than we did the last year before, etc., etc. We're spending a lot of money on children and more each year. So the issue is not how much we're spending, it's that we're not clear on what we're getting for it.
I love how you put that. I don't want to steal everything from your presentation, which I'm assuming we'll get on shortly, but we thank you for joining us. That is Director of Research at Capri, Dr. Diana Thornburn. So we will now go to the podium where I believe they're having the opening remarks by, that's Javon Keys. He's also a Director of Research. He is the moderator for today's function.
Yes, I think we have Dr. King on now.
Oh, actually, I am corrected. It is Dr. Damon King who's currently on. Yeah. So we go to the podium live now, listeners. Okay.
why the ministry's name have to change every single cycle. Dr. Stephen Carr is the Director of Policy Analysis, Director of the Policy Analysis and Research Unit, and he will be giving those remarks. Then we'll have a panel discussion on the findings of the report. On the panel will be Dr. Thorburn and also Andra Miller, who is a social policy specialist with UNICEF in Jamaica. And that panel discussion will be moderated by Javon Keys, who introduced us a short while ago. I'm now going to invite to the podium UNICEF's country representative here in Jamaica, Olga Isaza.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. The protocol has been established. Let me say that I am very glad to have the opportunity to present this report with CAPRI, one of the most serious think tanks in the region. So it is a pleasure to be with you for the launch of the Room for Improvement, the most thorough examination of child-focused public expenditure in Jamaica in 2 decades. Let me begin by thanking the government of Jamaica, the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, the Planning Institute of Jamaica, the Minister of Education, our partners, CAPRI, and all of you here this evening for engaging with a question that is absolutely critical. How can every dollar that Jamaica invests in its children work harder for them? This study starts from an important premise. Jamaica has made a sustained effort to invest in its children. Over the past 9 years, the country has protected social spending and allocates to children a share of the national budget that is comparable to many high-income countries. Education has been treated as a priority, and programs such paths have cushioned the impact of poverty on children, including during COVID. At the same time, the evidence is sobering. Children remain consistently poorer than the national average, and rural children poorest still. Despite high level of investment in education, learning outcomes have not improved at the pace we would hope, especially for boys, children with disabilities, and adolescents out of school. In areas such as mental health, child protection, nutrition, and housing, gaps in services and outcomes remain significant. Why then does it matter to measure public expenditure on children? Because what we cannot see, we cannot manage. Today, Jamaica does not yet have a system that routinely shows how much its public expenditure actually reaches children. Budget data are not disaggregated by age or beneficiary group. And in many sectors, a large share of what we describe as a child-focused spending is necessarily devoted to compensations and core operating costs, leaving limited fiscal space for other critical program inputs that service and system for children require. This is not unique to Jamaica. Many countries have discovered that their public finance management systems were never designed to make children visible in their budgets. The result is that ministries, permanent secretaries, and parliaments must take difficult decisions on the basis of partial information. When we measure child-focused expenditure more clearly, 3 things become possible. First, we can see whether public resources are aligned with the structural challenges children face: poverty, violence, mental health, geographic inequalities. Second, we can verify whether the commitments made to children are backed by realistic and trustable budgets, and whether those budgets are sustained over the time. Third, we can have a more honest conversation about trade-offs, not only whether we are spending enough, but whether we are spending in the right places, at the right time, in a child's life, and in the right way. What Capri and UNICEF have done together is to build from public data the most complete picture currently available of how Jamaica is investing in its children across 8 sectors. The report looked at the 9 years of budget and asked 4 very practical questions. How much is being spent on children and where? How that spending is composed? Whether government commitments to children are backed by visible and sustainable budget lines, and where data exists, whether outcomes are moving in the same direction as spending. The answer are nuanced. In education, total spending on children has risen, but operational budgets are under pressure, as most of the investment is absorbed by the wage of bill. In social protection, PATH has shown that Jamaica can deliver large-scale, predictable support to children in poverty, yet benefits levels and complementarity services do not always keep the pace with rising costs for families. In child protection and mental health, we see progress in specific programs, but systems that are still too small and fragmented to match the scale of children's needs. The central message is clear. Jamaica's challenge is not only how much it is spent on children, but how that spending is structured, tracked, and translated into outcome. One of the most important messages of this report is forward-looking. This is not yet a government-owned system for tracking child-focused expenditure. It is an independent analysis that demonstrates what is possible. In every country where this agenda has shaped policy in a lasting way, Ministry of Foreign or Finance and Planning have taken ownership of the methodology and embedded it in the budget process. That is what turns a one-off study into a routine part of public finance management. This brings me to 3 very concrete and I hope reasonable proposals. First, to explore with the Ministry of Finance and PIOJ a national approach to tagging child-focused programs within the budget classification, so that what is spent on children becomes visible without needing a special study every few years. This could begin as a pilot in a few key sectors and expand over time. Second, the progressively strengthen the publication of data on coverage, unit cost, and outcomes for major programs serving children in education, social protection, health, and protection. This does not require creating new systems from scratch, but using existing information systems to make child-relevant data more accessible and more useful for decision makers. Third, to reinforce reporting and accountability mechanisms in areas where children are particularly vulnerable. For example, ensuring regular public responding by agencies with child protection mandates and integrating child-specific indicators into annual performance framework. None of these steps require new legislation tomorrow morning or large new resources. They require something more fundamental: a shared decision to make children visible in the budget and to use this visibility to protect and strengthen the services on which they depend. The report is not a verdict on any single ministry or institution. It is a mirror that we hold up together. For government, it is a tool to sharpen policy and make the most of constrained fiscal space. For Parliament, oversight bodies, civil society, the private sector, and development partners, it's offered a common evidence-based support to Jamaica efforts for children. Children cannot vote, as was said prior, cannot lobby, and cannot allocate budgets. Their interests must therefore be reflected in the choices we make in laws, in budgets, and in the data we choose to collect and use. UNICEF values this alliance with Capri, not only for its analytical rigor, but also for its deep understanding of Jamaica's policy landscape and public finance system. Their ability to translate complex budget data into clear, actionable insights is precisely why UNICEF chose Capri for this work. Together, we can generate evidence that is both technically robust and directly usable for better decision for children. UNICEF stands ready to continue working with the government of Jamaica and all of you to take this agenda forward. The fact that we are having this conversation in this way is already a sign of Jamaica's commitment to its youngest citizens. Our task now is to turn that commitment into systems and practices that will outlast us. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, another or UNICEF representative here in Jamaica. And let me also say congratulations on your new appointment, as in short order she'll be going to become the Deputy Regional Director for UNICEF in the Latin American Caribbean office. So congratulations to you on that appointment. Y buena suerte a usted. Let me also take the opportunity as well to say a very special welcome to the Mayor of Kingston, His Worship, Andrew Swaby. We thank you so very much for joining us, sir. And let me also say a very special welcome to our listeners on Nationwide 90 FM all across Jamaica. We're so happy that they are able to be here to hear the findings, which brings us nicely into why we're here, ladies and gentlemen. So all of this research has been done, and as you heard, Dr. Diana Thorburn, lead researcher at Capri, is going to be coming to give us a sense of what the findings were in this very important research, Room for Improvement, the gap between public spending and child outcomes in Jamaica. This is also my reminder to you that the Slido is up and running. So during the presentation, if you have any questions, any burning thoughts, you can use the Slido, and reminding you that it's for every child. That's your access code. So for those of you online listening on the airwaves and in the room, that is your opportunity to write down those questions, share them, and we will see how best we can go through as many of them as possible. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Dr. Thorburn as she comes forward to give you the findings.
Over the last 3 decades, Jamaica has spent an average of 5% of its GDP on education. In 2023, that figure amounted to 19% of our total GDP. That is above Latin American and Caribbean average, and it is above OECD averages. It is consistent with expenditure in the world's richest countries, in the world's top performing education systems. We are allocating a share of our national income to education at the level of rich countries. We spend like a rich country. And yet, a child entering school today in Jamaica can expect 11 and a half years of schooling, but will learn only the equivalent of 7 of them. Jamaica's score on the World Bank's Human Capital Index, which measures the productive potential a child born today will reach by age 18, is 0.53, meaning a Jamaican child is on track to realize just over half their potential. We spend like a rich country, but we're not getting the outcomes of one. That gap between what Jamaica spends and what Jamaican children receive, and the outcomes we have to show for the money spent, is what this report is about. There are many reasons to spend on children, but there is one particular reason why we should not only spend on children, but why we should measure what we spend on children. And that is because the stakes are higher now than they ever have been. Everybody in this room is aware of Jamaica's fertility rate, one of the lowest in the world. Our population is aging, and the flip side of that is that our child population is shrinking. Every single child matters more now than it did before. When a country like Jamaica's child cohort shrinks, each child carries more of the weight of the country's future. They're a larger share of the workforce that is expected to drive growth, pay taxes, and sustain the generation above them. The return on investing on any single child goes up, and the cost of failing also goes up. So we have fewer children, higher stakes. I'm not here to give you a headline number. Jamaica does spend on children. It spends a lot. It spent more in 2025 than it did in 2024, and it spent more in 2024 than it did in 2023, and so on. But I can't give you a headline number, and I'm going to tell you why, because it will help to explain what the report does and what the report found. We did calculate a per-child expenditure figure, and we did calculate a total spending on children number, but there's no point in sharing it because that number would be meaningless. Why would it be meaningless? First, we cannot count it all. A large share of child-relevant expenditure never appears in the budget, in the expenditure, which is what we examined for this report. Entities such as NHT, Chase, InSports, JSIF all spend heavily on children. Those numbers do not appear in the estimates of expenditure. External financing supports a lot of child expenditure. That doesn't come in the estimates. Civil society spends a lot on children. That doesn't come in the estimates. Even allocations that do appear are often in budget lines that cannot be accurately disaggregated across all the populations that they serve, across all age groups. So any number that we come up with would be incorrect by construction and therefore inaccurate. Second, and probably more importantly, even a complete figure, even if we were able to get to a figure that we felt somewhat confident in, it still would not tell us what we need to know. Money allocated is not money delivered. The question that matters is not how much goes in, it is what comes out. And the link between the two depends on implementation, institutional capacity, accountability, and those are precisely the things that the report found to be deficient. A large number might suggest that the problem is solved. A small number might suggest that the solution is simply to spend more. Neither conclusion is warranted. What this report does instead is examine what the pattern of spending says about priorities and why the structures needed to turn spending into outcomes are not currently working. So what we did measure, we examined 9 years of the approved estimates of expenditure from 2017-18 to 2025-26 across 8 categories of child-relevant spending. These are the categories most commonly used, though with some variation in UNICEF's studies similar to this all across the globe. What matters is not the quantum, it is where the money goes, whether we're getting the outcomes we expect, and how we can do better. So put another way, the report does not assess whether Jamaica is spending enough or if it should spend more, but whether allocations are structured to translate into outcomes, a question that requires examining the conditions of delivery rather than the totals of appropriation. Here's what we found. When we talk about investing in children in Jamaica, we almost always mean education. Education dominates. It is by far the largest category of child-relevant spending in the estimates year after year. Jamaica spends more of its GDP on education, as I said earlier, than comparator countries and even more than richer countries, and yet learning outcomes remain low, human capital scores disappoint, and importantly, Jamaica, which has the lowest productivity in the Latin American Caribbean region, only Haiti and Cuba are lower than us, has a workforce whose productivity does not reflect the investment. Part of the explanation lies not just in how much is spent on education, it lies in what is being spent or not spent before children ever reach a classroom. The most consequential period of a child's life is the first 1,000 days, from birth to its 3rd birthday. This is when the brain develops the fastest, when nutrition deficits become permanent, when neglectful parenting leaves lasting dysregulation. Where a child lives and grows in these early years, the composition of the household, the geographical location, the volatility of the community, these have an outsized effect on who that child becomes. The rate of return on investing in this window is higher than at any later stage. The negative experiences of toxic stress, poor nutrition, inadequate stimulation can reduce adult earnings by up to 25%. What happens in the first 3 years leaves a mark that no subsequent investment can fully erase. Not a good primary school or a great high school, not a scholarship, not a well-resourced education system. The first 1,000 days are largely outside the education budget. They belong in health, in housing, in nutrition, in child protection, in social protection, which are precisely the categories where Jamaica's spending is the thinnest, the least protected, and the most opaque. Education spending cannot deliver its potential returns where the foundations were not built. Jamaica is investing heavily at the wrong end of the developmental timeline. This is a structural issue. There's a second structural problem running across almost every category we examined. The budget exists, the allocations are there, money is being spent, but an increasing share of every allocation across almost every sector is going to compensation of employees, salaries and wages for the people employed to deliver these services. And a correspondingly shrinking share is going to goods, services, and operational resources that actually deliver it. In education, compensation of employees absorbed roughly 83% of the budget in 2017-2018, and by 2024-2025, that had increased to 86%. The same pattern holds in child protection, food and nutrition, and recreation, culture, and sport. In 2022, the government implemented a major public sector restructuring. It was a rational response to long-standing wage compression. Teachers, social workers, public sector workers, broadly speaking, should be paid more. But it was not accompanied by a corresponding increase in operational budgets. So the wage bill went up, but to date, and maybe it's too soon to say, improved services have not followed. Money is being spent, it's not reaching the children. If we take a closer look at recreation, culture, and sport, we'll see how all of these issues that I've just been talking about come together. Recreation and culture and sport receive less child-relevant expenditure than any of the other 7 categories that we examined. Less than 2% of the total, declining in real terms across the entire review period. Compensation of employees has risen from 37% to 57% of category spending, further compressing the little operational budget that had existed. In sports and chase are 2 of the major spenders in this area, but their contribution cannot be established from public documentation because they're not traceable in the government estimates in a form that allows expenditure analysis. We also looked at the commitments in this sector, and the fulfillments of commitments were also found lacking. In 2018, the government committed to developing a national safeguarding framework for children in sport and culture. 7 years later, no publicly verifiable output has been identified. The commitment to develop CHAMPS as a premier global track event has no traceable dedicated budget line. We consider ourselves a cultural, creative, and track and field superpower, but we are not funding the conditions that produce it. There's a thread that runs through everything I have described and across all sectors. It persists because there is no mechanism to make these failures visible and no consequence for leaving them unaddressed. Across every sector that we examined, across every category we examined, we found no performance frameworks linking expenditure to outcomes and no disaggregated reporting connecting spending to what children actually received. So the estimates tell us what government intends to spend, what it plans to spend, what it spent the previous year, but it does not tell us what was delivered, to whom, or with what result. No requirement to report on outcomes means there is no onus to achieve them. The absence of data is not just a data gap, and this is a finding of the report. It is an accountability gap. The report covers a lot more ground than I have been able to do here this evening, and I would encourage you to read it for the full detail. And so we have 5 recommendations in the report, 4 of which I'm going to share here, 2 of which are not covered in the report, but I'll give a brief explanation of how those recommendations came about. And the first is kind of the obvious one, is that government introduced child disaggregated reporting requirements into our public financial management framework, requiring ministries and agencies with child-focused mandates to report child-specific program targets, output indicators, and prior year outturn, meaning what they actually spent the previous year, in their annual budget submissions, embedding this in statute over time to ensure continuity across administrations. We need to shift investment in our children towards the earlier and the earliest years of the life cycle. The budgets for early childhood health, nutrition, housing stability, child protection, and family support must be grown at a rate commensurate with the evidence on where the returns are highest. Recommendations 3 and 4 relate to child protection, though we didn't go into detail in the presentation. The child protection system has its own institutional weaknesses and allocation asymmetries, and the report flags it in particular need of stronger accountability measures. One of the recommendations in the report is related to child protection, and it is specifically related to children in state care who are overwhelmingly placed in institutional settings rather than family-based care, even though we know from overwhelming evidence that they have poorer outcomes, that it is a higher cost on the public purse, and that this is against the government's own stated commitment to deinstitutionalization. The report is recommending a structural shift by establishing a permanency planning framework for children in state care underpinned by a revised adoption statute, a domestic foster care financing model, and a case management protocol that moves away from the operational default of institutions to family-based placement, with a strategic plan to move away from institutional care completely. No more children's homes. And finally, one very specific and time-bound, time-sensitive recommendation that sits outside all the thematic clusters. I don't know how many people remember when the Prime Minister announced this wonderful Hope for Children Trust Fund in 2024. It is supposed to have its seed funding this fiscal year. The government needs to create the legislation for it and appoint a fund manager to fulfill its commitment, its very important commitment to children. What this study found, in one sentence, is that there is a gap between what we spend, what our children receive, and the country that we become as a result. It's not just children are the future, it is about the country that we are and the country that we want to become. Jamaica has solved harder problems than this. The fiscal consolidation of the past 15 years, the restructuring of public debt, the restoration of macroeconomic stability, the rebuilding of fiscal space, all of these required political will, institutional discipline, and difficult decisions across successive administration, and it worked. In having solved that problem, it has created the conditions for us for the first time in a generation to have the fiscal space to get what we do for our children right. We are not a rich country yet, but we can afford to do better by our children. We can afford to invest in our children in a way that we know where the money goes and we get commensurate returns. The question is not whether Jamaica can track what we spend on children. It's not whether we can measure what they receive. It's not whether we can treat every dollar as an investment in our country's future. The question is, are we going to choose to? Thank you.
Welcome back, listeners. You are listening to there. That was Dr. Thornburn. She was discussing the findings of Capri's research paper, Room for Improvement, the Gap Between Public Spending and Child Outcomes in Jamaica. We are coming to you live from the Wilmer's Boys School Auditorium. We're going to take a quick break, and then we come back. We're going to speak with the Social Policy Officer for UNICEF Jamaica, Andre Miller.
When life brings dreams, both big and small, you need a place that welcomes all. A helping hand, a friendly way. CNWJ Credit Union. People who care every day. Saving, growing side by side with a community full of pride. I belong. You belong. You belong. You belong. To CNWJ.
Serving Jamaica since 1961. CNWJ Cooperative Credit Union. Discover the benefits of belonging.
I belong.
Welcome back, listeners and viewers, to the Wilmer's Boys Auditorium. We are bringing you live the report from Capri that is in relation to the launch of their Public Financing for Children report. And we have with us now to discuss further the Social Policy Officer for UNICEF Jamaica, Andre Miller. Good evening, Mr. Miller.
Hey, Siobhan, how are you?
I'm doing quite well. So I've listened to the recommendations from the report, and I said to myself, I've played these games before because I recall UNICEF did a similar initiative with the Ministry of Finance back in 2022.
Public Expenditure Review.
Yes, and it was specific to education though, but I want to speak with you more broadly now. Why did UNICEF feel necessary to commission this report now again in 2026?
Sure, let me paint a picture for you. You ever seen a baby cry and we ignore that baby?
No, not at all.
We don't, exactly.
Definitely.
We pick up the child, and in fact, if two children are crying, we use both hands. What we recognize, the children in Jamaica need additional support. Now, what is excellent about this particular analysis is that it confirms that the government of Jamaica is spending billions on children. But what this report confirms is that that expenditure is not being monitored. So we cannot say in real terms that the resources are indeed reaching the children and the extent to which they're reaching the children. We know that schools are being built. We know that communities are being supported. But it's now time for us to turn the corner and be able to confirm that the resources can contribute to the outcomes that the country wants to see for its children. We've been doing this over the last 5 years. The Public Expenditure Review on Education, the study on children with disabilities, we've been doing results-based budgeting, and all of this builds up to this seminal moment where we're saying, Jamaica, look at your expenditure. It's now time for us to begin to monitor that expenditure and to say in real terms that we're meeting those commitments under the CRC, the Convention on the Rights of the Child.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things brought up by Dr. Thornburn is that when you look at the budget produced annually, you're not going to find a line item that says this is for children. When people think of the spending on children, they say, oh, the education budget. Exactly. But it's more than that. We have the PATH program, we have all the social interventions, we have healthcare. All of these, if you disaggregate them, have a portion that is dedicated to children, but we don't actually know what that portion is. So how do we now get that information into the hands of the public so we can demand more in terms of that accountability?
So it comes down to reform, but reform in this case is not legislative reform. In fact, it's a no-cost reform. We're saying let us begin to tag the budget. Let us begin to put in place codes that, for example, if you want to know how many children have been vaccinated, you can know. You want to know where your children are who have been vaccinated, you can know. You want to know how many boys have been vaccinated, how many girls have been vaccinated, how many children with disabilities have been vaccinated. It's important. So this report and this effort pushes us in the realm of increasing coverage, of assessing the adequacy with which we have expended the resources, and it ensures that it asks the question, have we been efficient in this expenditure?
And I think that question is important to ask of our public officials specifically, because another finding of the report is that when you analyze the spend of many of these projects, programs, and budgets, the majority of it goes towards salaries and wages. So we should expect that when that money is paid out, the outcomes also match that payment, correct?
Correct. In fact, we look at that particular finding in an interesting way. It's not a problem that the funds are going toward compensation, because what it suggests is that possibly in the Ministry of Education, we now have more specialist educators who are catering to the needs of children with disabilities. A parent, based upon the analysis that we did in 2021, would have to spend upwards of $200,000 to care for a child with a disability. But the government has put in place this one educator, specialist trained, who can bring together a pool of students. So that cost center is not passed on to the parent, but the government is truly absorbing it. So it's a good problem to have.
Excellent. And another thing, early childhood education, that's not how she framed it, Dr. Thornburg. She says that we must shift focus to the younger years. But in Jamaica, we understand it to mean early childhood education. But it's more than that. We need to make sure that the formative years of a child's life is as comfortable as possible, regardless of the socio-economic factors that impact them. So how do we go about doing that, making that shift?
Well, the first thing is the reason why. The reason why we need to shift from putting more resources at the higher level to the early childhood level is because we get higher returns on investment. In other words, better value for money. The research, the public expenditure review that we did at the World Bank some years ago confirmed that when you shift the resources, what you're liable to see is increased attendance rates, increased completion rates, and you're able to see children realizing the desirable outcomes for them as they transition from early childhood to secondary to tertiary education.
Understood. So that is Andre Miller. He is the UNICEF Social Policy Manager here in Jamaica. Thank you for joining us. We will go back to the podium now, listeners. I think you'll be joining them.
Yes.
And we look forward to hearing now from the discussion regarding this new policy research by Capri. Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
Accountability and public understanding. And so the ministry is prepared to work in these three practical areas going forward. First, improve child focus reporting within the education budget. Second, strengthen public's reporting on outputs and outcomes in areas such as special ed, early childhood development, school nutrition, and learning recovery. And third, collaborate with the Ministry of Finance, the Planning Institute of Jamaica, UNICEF, and other partners to strengthen the child focus expenditure tracking across government. Ladies and gentlemen, reports such as this plays an important role in informing policy decision, strengthening partnerships, strengthening planning, supporting continuous improvement within the sector. The ministry welcomes constructive review and analysis as accountability and transparency remain essential to national development. At the same time, it's important that assessments are balanced, evidence-based, and considered within the broader national context. Jamaica has continued to make significant investment in its children, particularly through the education sector. Our task now is to ensure that these investments becomes more visible, more targeted, more measurable, and ultimately more effective in improving the outcomes for our young children. And to the students here today, I leave with you this thought. Every discussion about educational policy, every budget decision, every reform initiative, all of it ultimately about creating better opportunities for you and for the generation coming behind you. I thank you very much, and I wish you a productive and meaningful launch session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Carr, for bringing that response on behalf of the Ministry of Education, Skills, Youth and Information. And we thank you so very much for being here, and we know that the conversation will continue beyond today. That's the whole idea of these kinds of discussions and this kind of research, ladies and gentlemen, because the change will not take place in this room, but it's what we'll do beyond here. And when we'll look at the recommendations and conversations about how we can make the changes recommended, or looking at how each representative and in their own spaces can make changes, then that's how we're going to make a difference. So we are going to be having our panel discussion. And a reminder to you, ladies and gentlemen, that wherever you are, you can send us questions via our Slido. That's SLIDO. So go ahead, and once you get there, the code is For Every Child. So once you enter that, you'll be able to access and send your questions. And already we're seeing a few questions coming in. So we look forward to getting those questions answered by our panelists. And of course, Dr. Thorburn will be back on stage to take a few of those questions. And she'll be joined by Mr. Andre Miller from UNICEF. And of course, once again, the UNICEF team, very integral in ensuring that this report was done, and they commissioned Capri because of how important this discussion and this report overall is for ensuring that we leave no one behind. And of course, that's a tagline linked to our Global Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, leaving no one behind. And we can look at quality education and ensuring that we leave no one behind by ensuring that all the finances trickle down in the right ways. And we're going to be having a bit more of a discussion on that. So of course, ladies and gentlemen, I see a couple more questions coming in. And of course, keep the conversation going online as well. There are a number of people who are not in this room, but they need to see and hear about what's taking place here today. So go ahead and ensure that you tag Capri online, and of course UNICEF online as well at various social media platforms to ensure that we have the conversation going beyond this evening. So I'm going to ask my panelists to join me, and I'm asking you to put your hands together for them as well. For clarity. All right, so one of the very important things, or one of the first questions I wanted to ventilate, because I got asked, what's this gap that's being referred to in the title of this report? So Dr. Thorburn, perhaps I'll start with you. I mean, the gap between public spending and child outcomes in Jamaica, what would you say is that gap that we're looking at?
So it's what we're putting in and what we're getting out, and we're not getting out commensurate with what we're putting in. And this is why this whole idea of not having a headline number is such a key aspect of thinking about the findings of the report. It doesn't matter if we're putting in $10 or $100. If we're not getting $10 worth of an outcome or $100 worth of an outcome, then it doesn't matter how much it is. So it is trying to understand what is happening between the input of the money and the output of the human worker, citizen, member of the labor force, not even the child, the person who is going to be the part of Jamaica that's going to keep Jamaica going forward. That's where that gap is.
And of course, the conversation beyond now will tell us that it's not a concern about spending or allocation of resources, in the sense that from a headline budgetary standpoint, Jamaica is in fact spending a lot on education, but it's a number of intricate things. For instance, how do we outline in the budget where this money is going? How can we track that from a transparency and governance standpoint? But let me bring you in, Andre. I mean, why is it important for us to do studies like this? I mean, of course, we know that UNICEF is big on ensuring that our children are, catered for, and when we look at the Convention of the Rights of the Child, but why do we need to be looking at this kind of data, this kind of research?
Yeah, thank you. I think we're at a very seminal moment for Jamaica as a country. We are just a few years yet from our reflection on the 2030 Development Plan, as well as the SDGs.
Right, all right, Sustainable Development Goals.
And that's important for us to note, because a budget signals a country's priority. And for children, they often do not have the opportunity to lobby on their own behalf. And so they need adults to speak up for them, to advocate for them, to put before the decision makers critical realities that they face. And so this moment, this study gives us an opportunity to pause
And what is beautiful about it is that it confirms that yes, Jamaica has spent and is spending billions on children, but it's now time to turn the corner and to begin to look at how do we now monitor what's really happening, and how do we ensure that all our children are receiving the critical support that we are providing for them. How do we ensure that coverage reaches all children? And as is the tagline for UNICEF, we are here for every child. We leave no child behind. As it is right now, if we don't monitor, there is the likelihood that we're leaving some children behind. And so this study causes us to pause, to reflect, and to put in place some very low-cost and low-hanging actions that can cause us to really bring more children into the safety net.
I will reinforce some of those low-hanging actionable items a little later on in the discussion. But one of the things, anytime I speak to researchers, I always like to ask, because there's always that idea that you may go into that research with a thought or an expectation of what the possible outcomes could be. So I'm going to come to you, Dr. Thorburn, with that question shortly, but I wanted to ask you, were you surprised by anything in particular, Andre, when you saw the findings of this research?
The evidence shows commitment. It also shows that this commitment is repeated year after year after year.
So there's no doubt that we are keen on investing in our children.
Exactly. However, the allocations and expenditures are not always visible. And so that's where we have to now take the conversation. We know that we're a child-friendly nation. We now have to look at how do we tangibly demonstrate that we're a child-friendly nation, and that is in our budget.
But for somebody who may be listening or watching and maybe wondering, but why does it need to be visible? If it is that the money is there and it's being allocated, why does it need to be visible?
As was said earlier in the presentation, if it's not seen, it's not done. And that's the truth. And because children, and I made the comment, because children don't vote, they are often not deemed a constituent of the broader constituency. And so their voices gets lost in the thick of the noise in the marketplace. But the truth is, they are the investment for the future. The country has to begin to look at the capital outlay now, or the significant capital outlay later. And I put it to the country that if UNICEF says if you make that investment today, you're likely to spend less tomorrow.
Absolutely, because one of the there are a couple of things that stood out for me in processing this research, but the first 1,000 days, the most consequential in any child's life. And those first 1,000 days, if the right investment isn't made, as an adult, that child is likely to see about a 25% drop in their potential economic earning.
Yeah, so the evidence for that is actually phenomenal, and it was done right here in Jamaica, and we detail this in the report itself. But there's been a remarkable longitudinal study of Jamaican children. I think that cohort is about 35 now, and they were able to show very clearly in very rigorous research with extremely high integrity that the children who received stimulation, and the stimulation was they trained the mothers of these babies to play with their babies. They trained the mothers to look their babies in the eye and talk to them. That was the stimulation. Those children grew up to have fewer criminal issues. They stayed longer in school, they had better employment outcomes, they had better health, physical as well. There was a nutritional component to the intervention. They earned 25% more than the control group, which did not receive the intervention, meaning their mothers did not get trained to play with them as babies. So yes, the data is very clear that those first 1,000 days have a tangible output that we can actually count, and that was done right here in Jamaica. So it's not even something we can say, oh, that's an imported thing that happens elsewhere. And that research has been taken from here and put into policy and programs all around the world.
Jamaica leading as always, but very interesting findings there. But let me bring it back to my original question about what did you expect to find, and did it match up with what you actually found in your research?
Yeah, so Capri's been doing research on children since 2018. We first started with the UNICEF Situation Analysis of Children in Jamaica report. It was the first research we had ever done, and many people think of Capri as an organization that does research on children, but it started there. Every single report we have done since then came out of that original situation analysis. And then I wear other hats as well in child protection outside of Capri. So I was pretty certain that the research was just going to support my preconceived notion that we don't spend enough. And so I was it's always nice as a researcher to find something you didn't expect. And I actually was surprised by the finding we spend more than I realized. I wasn't surprised that we're not accounting for it. But what it said to me was that we have the money. We're spending the money. We're not short of money to spend on children. As I said, we're not a rich country yet, but we have more resources than we have ever had. And we have a stated commitment to children. And it's not, we talk about children are the future, they don't have votes and so on. But we're also really we're talking about the country that we are all a part of. It's not just that children are cute and they're vulnerable. This is nation building. So there's a developmental question as well, a development question, not just about children. We're talking about the country that we're building and that we're creating.
So, there are a number of recommendations, 5 particularly, and we're going to get to them shortly. But for you, Andre, UNICEF has always been keen on ensuring that you have a real sense of, one, what's happening with our children, and of course finding solutions to ensuring that we leave none of our children behind. So from this report, there are a number of potential low-hanging fruits, but what would you say in your view would be maybe a top 1 or 2 that could potentially be accelerated so we could see potentially some movements towards those recommendations being realized?
Yeah, so we need to get to the stage, as is the case in other countries, Guatemala and Argentina. We need to know where the money is going. Yeah, we need to follow where the money is going so that we can know whether or not our coverage is increasing. We also need to know the adequacy of that spend. So one of the things that UNICEF is recommending out of this analysis is that we begin a process of tagging the budget. And what is really tagging the budget? Is putting in place a code that looks at critical deprivations that children experience. So say, for example, you want to know how many children have been vaccinated. Not only would you want to know how many have been vaccinated, but you want to know where those children are located, how many in rural Jamaica. You want to know how many boys, how many girls. You want to know how many children with disabilities. So disaggregating the data by some critical domains that allows us to know to what extent we are reaching the children where they are, so that when the next fiscal cycle comes, because Jamaica has an excellent fiscal responsibility framework, we now have to move that framework to the point of not just establishing procedures, but we need to move the framework to the point of being able to monitor how effective we are at executing that framework. So tagging the budget allows us to be able to know who the money is reaching, and also whether the resources are adequate, and if we need to increase or adjust as the case may be, as we would have found in the public expenditure review we conducted with the World Bank some years ago. It pretty much said Jamaica is spending well on education, 5% of GDP. That's great. When you compare that in the region, we're doing well. When you compare it to OECD countries, we're doing well. However, we need to look a little bit more at the data. The data is saying to us that we're not spending as much on early childhood education, where there is a higher return on investment for the country in comparison to other levels of education. Not saying we should stop, but we need to look at where it matters most and where do we get value for money, stronger value for money.
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Thorburn, one of our audience members they've sent in a question, and they're asking, and it's linked to what you're saying now, are there any examples where targeted spending has produced meaningful improvements for children?
The one that comes most to mind, so in the report, we looked at, I think it was 40 different commitments that we could trace, that the commitment was made, and we could identify a budget line for, or some line of expenditure for, and the extent to which it was completed. And there were 4 fully aligned commitments that were made. And one of them was the Ramps in Schools program, where the Ministry of Education had committed to making schools more accessible to special needs children. And they had set a target of how many ramps in how many schools, and they met that target. It was allocated for and it was delivered. And what was characteristic of all of the commitments that were aligned, so all the commitments that were fulfilled, was that they had dedicated numerical targets, dedicated budget lines, and accountability frameworks. That was the common thing. Even though these 4 commitments were all different across different times and across different sectors, that was the common feature of the 4 fulfilled or aligned commitments. So that would be one of them. There weren't, as I said, it was 4 out of, I think, 40, if I remember correctly. So most of them are only partially aligned, a few are unaligned. There was one category that almost was what we called reversed, where government had gone back on its spending, which is in the allocation for foster care, children who are in foster care. When we looked at real allocations over the period, over the review period, the real allocation to foster care has gone down quite dramatically between 2017, 2018, 2024, 2025, 2026. And that is extremely troubling for so many reasons. One is there's a stated commitment to deinstitutionalization, meaning to placing children more in family environments than in children's homes. Yet the amount that is being spent is going down. We also know that the cost of a child in a family, in a foster care placement, is about 10% of the cost of a child in a children's home. So it is mind-boggling that more children are not being placed in family placements, that we're continuing to put children in children's homes at such a high cost with such poor conditions in the homes. So that is kind of the reverse example of where targeted spending achieved. This is something that we have identified is spending is decreasing, the real spending is decreasing, and this is on a stated commitment. So there's so many concerns about that particular line. And that's actually a line in the budget. That is actually a line in the budget of how much is allocated to foster care. So we were able to trace that just through looking in the estimates. And you can see the decrease in the real spend on children in foster care.
Andre, when we look at the fact that Jamaica is at a place where we're below replacement rate, roughly, and the conversations now, and you said it in your findings, Dr. Thorburn, that every dollar spent now is even more critical because we have fewer children, which means that the investment in each child is absolutely important for us to see a return on that investment. So I wanted to ask you, Andre, I mean, when you look at that reality, how critical is it for us to move now to make these changes? And it's not necessarily changes per se, because as also shared in the report, a number of them are low-hanging fruits. But how would we, based on what you're seeing, UNICEF has seen across the region, and based on this report, how much of a threat would you say is inaction based on the findings of this report?
Which is where I'll start. The cost of inaction is far greater than the cost of action. Jamaica already has the framework to be able to institute a lot of these recommendations, and there are not many recommendations. It's 5. Very low-hanging fruits. Within this fiscal year, the budget call comes in September. We can sit together. The Ministry of Finance is at the table. We have had conversations with the Ministry of Education present, Labour and Social Security, and so we believe that the first starting point is let's look at the indicators. Let's look at the indicators that are aligned to children's development and well-being. And let us see how we can begin to code those in the budget so that by the end of the next fiscal year, we can make some more concrete statements about the expenditure. That's one. Two, I do believe that Jamaica has significant goodwill, and when we look at the lay of the land within the region, UNICEF has been a partner of choice for the government of Jamaica when it comes down to children's well-being, and that's not my gospel. It was said by Dr. King earlier, and as such, we stand toe-to-toe ready to support the government with technical assistance within the region. We're a multi-country office come next year, which means that we're bringing far greater technical boots on the ground to support not just Jamaica, but the region to move on this in a collective manner. It's a homogeneous conversation, a homogeneous topic that affects not just Jamaica. And so Jamaica can lead, because what is good about this, Javon, is that Jamaica has led in so many areas in development of children. We're seeing it in terms of the expenditure for PATH, direct cash transfers. It's a proven area where funds go directly to children. We're seeing it in relation to the school feeding program, where funds directly hit children, or not hit children, where funds directly impact children, yes, hit their accounts. We're also seeing it in the use of universal access policy for health, where children go to the hospitals, at no cost to them and their families. And so if we look at how we can collaborate, if we look at our indicators, if we look at coding in the budget, it becomes, these are critical key entry points that allows us to move the needle and on this issue over the next 12 months, dare I say.
So I'm sure when people read the report, they'll not have this question, but it was very clear to me that a lot of the actions required, Dr. Thorburn, don't necessarily require much expenditure at all to get done. So how would you respond to that? Because someone might be watching, Lord, it's going to cost a whole heap of money if you put in them something you have a way to talk about.
So yes and no. Many of the changes, Andre mentioned that we already have several frameworks in public expenditure that can be extended to cover child-related expenditure. But I think at the core of the lack of data, the lack of tracking, the accountability weaknesses are capacity issues, institutional capacity issues. That is something that exists across the board in all sectors.
Could you delve a little bit more in
yeah, so what I'm saying is that, and this is reflected in some ways in the compensation ratios, that we are spending a great deal on the delivery of the services. Dr. Reed said, teachers are the service. They are. But there's also a lot that needs to be done, what you might say, in the back office, that is not the teachers, that impacts what the delivery of the education service, the quality of the delivery of the education service. So, for example, mental health. We need more guidance counselors. We need more child guidance clinics. Why don't we have those? In some of the answer to that question is we don't have enough mental health professionals literally in Jamaica. So we have a capacity deficit to deliver some of these kind of side or not peripheral, but adjacent services to children that would make the investment in education. So we talked about, the investment in education. Yes, we are spending a great deal, but if that investment is not reaching a child who is prepared to receive all of that investment, if they have not had that first 1,000 days, or even if they are already in school and they're coming to school from a home where it is not meeting their developmental needs, the capacity to deliver the services and to provide for the infrastructural and program needs, that is where we do have a deficit, and that will take money to solve it. But that's where tracking comes in, because if we have a better sense of where those areas are lacking, then we can allocate for them. Now we just have a sense of it. We just have a sense that we don't have enough people working in mental health. We don't have enough social workers. Jamaica has 1/3 of the cohort of social workers that it ought to have. We ought to have 3,000 plus social workers. We have just over 1,000 social workers. That's not an obvious thing that jumps out or is not going to jump out when you're talking about allocations. But if you're talking about capacity to deliver social services, whether to children or to any other vulnerable population, that's when you come to the capacity deficit. And that will take allocations and money to solve. But it's money that we have to spend. I mean, it's not a question, it's not a luxury, it's not welfare. These are, the building blocks of our country that we're talking about. And again, it's not just about, children are vulnerable. It's that this is quite literally our future. This is our tomorrow. This is our pension.
Quite literally.
Yes.
Because, of course, if we're below replacement rate and we're not investing in our children, it means that, therefore, there may be a gap as it relates to when I get to the point of retirement, there's nobody contributing to that retirement pool, for instance. But it's a serious conversation that we have to have because it's all cross-cutting, and the report shows us that it's multi-sectoral as well, which is why the report highlights 8 key sectors within which we must also take a look at how spending is linked to education and how those funds are flowing.
Javon, I just wanted to say one more thing, which is that, we only looked at the estimates and at the budget. And, as I had said in the outset, we can't come up with a per child number because so much spending happens outside of what we see in the budget. And, part of the research was to engage with the JSIF and the CHASE and the NHT. And they are all spending on children, but they are also not disaggregating and not tracking. And when you ask, it's like, yes, this is something we should be doing. We would like to do this. And so it's not just about putting in the performance expenditure management frameworks. It's also about requiring across government, all MDAs, including the ones that we don't see in the estimates, to also do child-reported spending. So if we look at NHT, and not only NHT, the HAJ as well, the Housing Agency of Jamaica, which is mandated to formalize communities and work in rural areas to improve the condition of communities. That is a crucial area for child development. The quality and conditions of a child's home environment are incredibly important for their development and also for their performance and their ability to learn. So the same thing that we talked about, the expenditure in education, it can't be realized because many of the children aren't able to learn to fulfill their potential and take up all that expenditure and all of that investment. If we could put a dedicated line in or mandate in HAJ, in NHT, beyond just putting in a playground in a community where they're, but how is what this housing project or this community infrastructure project, how are we going to track children's outcomes in this project already? That is something that we can do and that we should do. And when we're talking, and that will also allow us to see if we're going to be shifting, if we're going to take up the recommendation of shifting more resources into the other areas outside of education that matter for education's investment to be realized and for child development more broadly. Those kinds of changes will help us to get to that, to achieve that objective.
Because it's all connected.
Yes.
Andre, one of our audience members are asking, or saying rather, there is a difference between spending in education and investing in children. And they're saying, how can this research help to redirect how we operate to see more results? An investment is long-term. And it also looks at outcomes that you want to realize. So you put some money down because you have a plan in mind. Spending is a response to something that's happening now. We advocate for strong investments in children because children require long-term prioritization, not just only in the budget, but in all spheres of their development. And so, which is why this report not only speaks to the investments in education, but it covers 7 other sectors which are important. In fact, it's interesting that the thinnest level of expenditure goes toward the first 1,000 days. That is a wonderful point for us to have the conversation, because again, as I said it before, when we make that investment at that point, we will see the returns later on. So it's not just a response to an immediate need. A baby crying, taking that child up is not just the only thing that you do. You have to begin to assess, is there hunger happening? Is the child cranky? Does the child want to sleep? So as a society, we have to take up our children in hand and not just respond to what we see at surface level, but begin to look deep within to see what are those intrinsic and internal needs that exist that we must begin to address. And that's an investment.
This is a whole of society scenario, and we're speaking a lot about a lot of the intricacies that will require government action, yes. But is there a space for consideration for private sector and other stakeholders who are also in this cross-cutting realm? What would you say, based on what you're seeing in the research, the role would be for other stakeholders in helping us to bridge that gap that now exists?
For me, the big takeaway from this report and from this research is that education is important, but there are other things that are also very important that we're not spending enough on. And a lot of pressure comes on government to spend on education. It's a very protected sector. We spend a lot on it, and a lot of pressure is put on the ministry. And there's a lot of disappointment that we are still not getting outcomes. We're putting in so much money, we're putting in so much investment, so much effort, and we're still not getting the outcomes. Our productivity levels are still extremely low. We're not seeing the human capital development that we would expect to see. And this is we have been putting money into education for a long time. So for me, the implication for private sector and also for interested Jamaicans who want to know where they need to start lobbying and start putting pressure on decision makers is we need to start putting more money into the areas, the sectors, the programs, the interventions that come before children go to school, and not just early childhood education, into the things that are, the Brain Builder program, but Brain Builder program that is going to start from early. So taking the examples and the lessons from the same Reach Up Jamaica intervention, it's not just parenting workshops, it's targeted interventions to teach mothers, not just the ones who are going to show up at the parenting workshop. Those ones you don't even need to worry about. It's always something that amuses me about our insistence on parenting training. The ones who come to the training, they're by definition already going to be okay. But that program was a home visit program. It went to visit people in their homes. You didn't have to opt in to show up. But we need to be thinking more about how we are reaching the very youngest ones who have the greatest needs. And many of those needs, we already know them. We do have data indicating where the needs are. What we don't have the data is showing how we are actually targeting those needs by putting spending where we would like it to go. And that is where the accountability frameworks and the measurement frameworks come in, in the system design of these interventions. So for me, the biggest takeaway for the private sector is, yes, education is important, but these are the areas that you, whether in your corporate social responsibility, your philanthropy, also need to be investing in the areas that are not as obvious, because it's very easy to build a computer lab or, contribute to a new roof on a school, and these are important things. But there's other areas where their spending is needed, both by government and by private sector.
Andre, did you want to add anything to that?
Every dollar has a story behind it. Whether it's having to find money for a taxi fare, or to buy a meal, or to go to the supermarket. And it's important, when I sit at my desk, I think about how does this number contribute to somebody else's life. And I say to myself, dear 5-year-old Andre, what did you need that I can provide today that would have made your life better then? And it behoves all of us sitting in this room and online to ask ourselves the question, are you a policymaker? Does your number transform somebody else's life? That $1 that we allocate toward school feeding program, toward PATH, toward the school bus program, whatever it is, mental health, it goes a mighty long way. And so we need to begin to track, where does that $1 go? Like a leaf that goes down a gully filled with water, we need to track where that $1 goes to see and ensure that it reaches every single child.
I mean, we could spend the entire evening just having this discussion based on all of the findings from the report. And I do know that there may be a few questions in the audience. While we have a few of them on Slido, however, I'm going to take those, and in the event that there are potentially any questions in the audience, we may be able to take one, but we're encouraging you to use the Slido. I see here another question: what factors have influenced or may influence a government's willingness to improve accountability and implement meaningful policies and programs? I'm going to put that one to you, Dr. Thorburn. Based on your own research over the years and even putting together this body of work, what do you see as factors that have influenced or may influence a government's willingness to improve accountability and implement these meaningful policies/ programs?
So when we talk about government's willingness, we have to think about, there's the politicians, the elected officials who want to get re-elected. Then there's also the bureaucracy. There are two very different layers of government. And so I think we need to think about, well, who are we trying to reach? Who are we trying to convince? Politicians, I would say, and this is based on research not only on this, but on so many of the other things that we've done over the years, they're convinced when you can present something to them that is not too difficult to do and will have a visible, tangible outturn. So this is something that they can campaign on. And it needs to not be too difficult to do, because they need to be able to do it in that electoral cycle. And I would say this qualifies. This is something that I think is an easy sell. I don't think it's as easy a sell as to the people who would then have to be doing it. Holding people accountable, putting in accountability frameworks is more work for people. It is. Jamaica is a low productivity country, and we're low productivity across the board in our private sector and in our public sector. That's been a topic of the public discourse recently, is the productivity of the public sector. Putting in accountability measures in private sector or public sector is going to force people to produce results.
Which is critical.
Yes. So for me, that would be the nut that needs to be cracked.
All right, so I think I have about 10 seconds, but Andre, your closing words here.
I'll use what a youth advocate said to me. We want to see the numbers match the words. I'll end right there.
Yeah. Any other short phrase you want to leave, Dr. Thorburn?
It's up to us as citizens to hold our government and our civil servants accountable.
Well, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a very insightful evening of discussion. And remember, of course, to ensure that you check out the Capri social media platform as well as the Capri website, where you'll be able to find the report. Also ensure that you're following UNICEF online and you're engaging with UNICEF. Of course, they're the ones who commissioned Capri to get this report done. So, room for improvement. The gap between public spending and child outcomes in Jamaica. We thank you so very much for being with us here this evening, ladies and gentlemen. For those online, we thank you as well. And of course, keep the conversation going wherever you are. Until next time, my name is Javon Keys. It's been a distinct pleasure being with you this evening. And of course, please ensure that you are taking your own steps in your own spaces to keep the conversation running on this important. Thank you so very much.
There you have it, listeners. That was the report on the room for improvement, the gap between public spending and child outcomes in Jamaica. A very poignant report on, are we getting value for the untold billions that we spend in terms of getting proper outcome for our children. Where is the gap and what needs to be done to address it? We thank you for joining us here at Nationwide at 5. Thanks to our technical operator for the evening in studio, that's Andrew Glenn, the big man Bugs Anderson. Our technical engineer here on site was Jermaine Compass, our videographer Tajay Thompson, sales supervisor Joan Shervington, who set everything up, and as well the super producer herself, Dana Davey, and all my friends and compatriots over there in the news and production department, led by the very capable Cara Powell. It's been a good evening. Thank you all for joining us, and I leave you with Age Quadagis. All that you do, do it to the best of your ability. That's the Wolmer's Boys School motto, the Wolmer's School motto, and their words to live by. Thank you for joining us. I'm Siobhan Campbell. Have a good evening.
The Philharmonic Orchestra of Jamaica presents